It's really quite spectacular. These are the organic gases that are still continuing to come off of the meteorite. We take the meteorite and we break it in a fresh fracture and then put it under the electron microscope so that we look at a freshly broken piece of the meteorite. We found a lot of very, very complex structures that look like microfossils of blue-green algae, not just in terms of shape, but also in terms of precise detail in structures like reproductive structures and the presence of external structures as well.
You found evidence of life.
I think it's tremendously interesting that the meteorites appear to contain the remains of living organisms. I think that these living organisms were actually living on a body like a comet. If in fact this is correct, this means that comets may be carriers of life from one place of the solar system to another.
He's found fossils, entire colonies of fossil microorganisms just stuck in the middle of these space rocks.
It's amazing.
I think it is amazing. I think it really proves that comets were the carriers of life, are still the carriers of life. And when a comet becomes exhausted, when all the gases flow out of them, then these fossils remain, and that's what he's finding.
Richard's claim that this is fossilized life is highly contentious, and it still leaves open the question as to whether life forms on a meteorite could survive the dramatic impact of landing on Earth. They say it's not the falling that kills you, but the sudden stop at the end.
What Mike is doing today is he's taking small grains of rock which have bugs in and then putting them into a missile, a carrier which will be launched in the gun, and the grains of rock carry on and hit the target. The bug is sitting in a rock. It lives in the rock and is quite happy there as bugs go. But in our case, that bug is suddenly going to be accelerated.
At the University of Kent, they're trying to replicate what happens to the bugs when they crash into Earth on the back of a meteorite. For this, they need a very big gun and some very small bugs. Oh, and a belief in panspermia.
So what will happen next is we fire the gun, and we want to reach a speed of 5 kilometers a second. That's about 10 to 15,000 miles per hour. So it's going to be fast. The target is water with a rock behind it. So it's like an ocean, where first you have the water and then there's an ocean floor beneath it. They will hit the water as if they've come from space at these 10, 20,000 miles per hour. And the bugs will be very heavily shocked. And this would normally kill most things. The only question is, will it survive? And if it does, it will just be happy again, growing in its new home.
The firing of the gun happens in a vacuum to maximize the speed. The bugs are now on a 15,000 mile per hour roller coaster. And remember, in space, no one can hear you scream. Have any of the bugs survived?
And I'm afraid nothing's hit the target. The rock has come off slightly off axis, and instead of going through the hole here, has hit the container up here, so our target's still intact, and our bugs have hit solid metal, and that's a lot harder than water when you hit it at high speed, and so they've probably been crushed and almost certainly all are dead. So hey-ho, it's a bug's life.
But other experiments by Mark have confirmed that bugs can survive. These are some of the lucky ones. The casualty rate is very high, but this is not a problem.
What would happen is if you went to the garden and dug up 1 gram of soil, one little small cubic centimetre perhaps of soil, you'd find 10 or 100 million bugs in there. If we could fire a rock that size in our gun, with that number of bugs in, we would find about 10 or 100 of them survive our experiments. So the survival rate is very, very low. But you only need 10 or 100, and they just multiply. About 5 or 6 years ago, when I went to the first meeting and announced this work, we were still doing tests and didn't have success, but someone in the audience just stood up and said, "This is crazy, why are you doing this? Everyone knows the answer, nothing survives." Well, we then did some more experiments. We started to show that in high-speed impacts, bugs can survive and potentially could have come from space if they were out there and invaded the Earth, as it were. At which stage, when we started announcing the results in conference, a different person stood up in the audience and said, "Well, why are you doing these experiments? Everyone knows the answer, of course they survive." So in the space of just a few years, it went from being a denouncement to, "Why are you wasting our time? Because of course it's trivial."
It's not trivial by any means, because Mark's experiments have helped to support panspermia. And it's not just been experiments in the lab that have verified the concept.
Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check.
A tragic real-life event has added support to the idea. In 2003, the Columbia space shuttle blew up during re-entry, and 7 astronauts lost their lives. What is not well known is that some of the microorganisms on board the space shuttle survived.
Columbia, was a mission that effectively broke up over a multi-state area. And inside of some of those pieces, were experiments that had been flown for biological purposes. And in at least one of those experiments, the organisms survived the trip. So the Columbia accident was a tragedy that involved not only the melting of a wing, but the physical dismantling of a shuttle. It's a very interesting, fact that things falling from high up on the Earth can survive.
All scientists now agree that microorganisms can survive extraordinary conditions, be it radiation, extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme impacts. Most space scientists also believe that the solar system almost certainly contains other life forms and are very, very keen to find them. And a few scientists are convinced that certain meteorites contain the remains of life. Putting all the evidence together, Chandra believes that this is how life on Earth began in the first place. It arrived on the back of a comet 3.8 billion years ago.
Life did not start here on the Earth. We came in ready, packaged genetic bits and pieces from space.
Other scientists disagree. They think life started here on Earth. One scientist who argues that it all began here in a small bubbly puddle is David Deamer.
If you never thought about it, if this is the first time you ever saw a soap bubble, you'd be astonished that this kind of a structure could just appear out of nowhere.
David is not blowing bubbles just for fun. He's interested in how soap bubbles, by assembling themselves, will help explain the origin of life.
So this is what we mean by a self-assembly process. It's one of the very simplest self-assembly processes.
He's using his expertise in bubble blowing to try to create new life in the lab.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Oh, in the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
David uses soapy material to form microscopic bubbles. This froth is what David believes was the first step in the origin of life on Earth. No comet required. The bubbles, or vesicles as he calls them, are crucial to his theory because they provide the perfect place for making new life from scratch.
So we think the vesicles were very much part of the first forms of cellular life All life today is cellular. It means there's a membrane surrounding a compartment. And what we're doing here is stepping through the evolutionary process that must have occurred on the Earth about 3.5 billion years ago when the first forms of cellular life appeared.
David then inserts small chunks of DNA inside his artificial cells.
Is it alive? Not yet. But it's a shared goal of a number of laboratories now to actually make an artificial form of life.
And some might say a dangerous goal.
I don't think so. The fact is that there are all sorts of dangerous life out there right now, the latest being the avian flu virus, for example. And what we might do in the laboratory would not stand a chance of surviving, I think, in today's biological world. We think, however, that we're trying to do something that simulates what happened on the early Earth, and not trying to put together a living being in the sense that Frankenstein was.
I think they're playing it good. I think the object of all these experiments is to show that life is not that special a system. I would be exceedingly surprised if he succeeded, or if anybody succeeded, because the improbabilities are so immense, and to think that they could be overcome in a small laboratory flask is asking not for the moon, it's asking for the cosmos.
David Deamer is the first to admit that his cells are not fully fledged living organisms. But if he does succeed in creating life relatively easily, then it makes it much more credible that life could have started on Earth.
I'm always attracted to what we call Occam's razor. Look for the simplest explanation. And the simplest explanation is that there was a set of organic molecules which could self-assemble into microscopic structures that increasingly took on the properties of life as we know it. So, to sum up, life began on the Earth and was not delivered to the Earth.
We still don't know how life began on Earth. We don't know how life would have begun on other places in the cosmos, even though it's generally accepted that life began on Earth through these primordial reactions in the ancient oceans. It's quite possible that life began on Earth as a result of transfer of biological materials from other portions of the solar system.
It's these arguments that make Chandra so determined to get to the bottom of the red ring. If the red cells really are alien life, then it must be proof of panspermia. Chandra has been doing independent tests on samples of the red rain. In science, things are rarely clear-cut, and he has very different results from Godfrey.
And these are positive amplification products. So this is DNA from the red rain.
Wow, there's no doubt about it.
There's no doubt about it.
It's absolutely conclusive as far as I can see.
The discovery of DNA in the red rain cells has been corroborated by another lab. Yet this recent finding has done nothing to dent Chandra's unshakable belief that the red rain is extraterrestrial. He believes that all life in the cosmos will probably share various types of DNA.
Before I came, I had grave doubts as to whether the red rain was really an indication of life coming from space, new life coming from space. But on reflection and after talking to Godfrey, I think I would now fairly firmly believe that it did represent an invasion of microbes from space.
Over in Washington, D.C., the Planetary Protection Officer remains skeptical. He thinks the red rain has a more mundane origin.
The material, when examined by astrophysicists and people who are looking for evidence to support a view, doesn't appear to be anything that they've ever seen before. But people who actually have seen things before say, looks like red algae to me. I would tend to go with the people who have seen more things in the biological kingdom rather than those who are looking to support their own ideas about how the world should work without the data to back it up.
For the moment, the jury's out. But Chandra remains convinced